Hello there. This is one of the Schrimshaw series from their Great American Outdoors series that I reviewed a while back. I had 3 of them. The first sharpening video I did was one, I gave that to a friend as a gift. So I want to carry one of these, so I decided that I would sharpen another one up. The model number of this one is SC505. It was made, as far as I can determine, in 1985. So this is a 35-year-old, new old stock, never been carried, never been sharpened, never been used. Stockman in their Schrimshaw series. And what I want to do, this is a 35-year-old factory edge, and you'll see it cuts, but it's not the greatest. As a matter of fact, it will not shave. It's not very good at all. But this is a Soft Arkansas, and I have recommended this stone as, if you only had one stone, this would be the stone as a sharpener that I would recommend for pocket knives and things like that. And if you don't have to do any reprofiling, if the blade doesn't have nicks in it, or you don't have to do any corrective kind of work, this stone is, in my opinion, the best all-around sharpening stone you can find. And this edge is dull. It will not cut hair. I don't know if you can see that, but it's flipping dull. Okay, but it's a factory edge. There's nothing wrong with this edge. It just is not sharp. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to sharpen this edge. I'm going to sharpen this knife on an Arkansas stone, a soft Arkansas. And I'm going to use a tiny bit of pressure, not very much. No, I'm not telling you what the foot pound of pressure is that I'm using, because frankly I don't know, just a light pressure. You can hear, by the way, when I do the upsweep, that I am moving the blade across the stone, that I'm using a bit of pressure, but not a whole lot. What I want to do is I'm trying to find this angle. And it looks like I've got it pretty well. And we're just going to sharpen it up. And the thing of it is you don't need anything else. A soft Arkansas, if it's prepped right, this is prepped to 60 grit, sick. But it just as easily, I just as easily could have taken emery cloth, 60 grit emery cloth, or 60 grit gator or free cut sandpaper, and prepped the surface as well. Or I could have taken it out and done the old fashioned rub it on a cement sidewalk kind of deal to level and flatten it, and then went to like the 60 grit if it needed that, if the polish was too high on it. Because what you want to do, for me, okay, I don't care what anyone else does, how a person preps an Arkansas stone can be fairly personal to them. I know how I like mine, and what you'll find is that you'll get to a point where you'll understand how you want that stone to cut, and you'll prep it accordingly. So I don't really worry about what anyone else does. It's not something that I worry about, which is one of the reasons, like, I'm a member of about 4 knife groups on Facebook, but I rarely ever post. And the reason is there are too many people on these knife pages and knife forums that think their opinion is the only one that matters, the only one that counts, and that if you're not following their way of doing things, you're doing it wrong. And, you know, what I say to that is pretty much, I'll do things my way, thank you. And I'm not asking anybody any permission. So, the only time I really ever post is if I think I can help someone. So, and that's kind of like, you know, I posted a video earlier about a QSP knife that I received from a friend, and I called it OSP. Well, I don't know a lot about all the different brands. I'm not a knife expert, and I'm not trying to make people think that I am. This channel is not. Yes, I review knives, and I'll be reviewing that knife. If I come across a knife, a new knife, I'll review it and talk about it a bit and all of that. But this channel is about learning to sharpen. It's not about, look, I know all this about all the different knives, and I didn't even know QSP existed until like 2 weeks ago, okay? And I don't really care. There are so many different knife brands out there. There are old traditional knife brands like this Schrade, the Old Timer, Buck, Case, that kind of thing. And then there are newer knife brands, and there are high-end knives and high-end knife brands and stuff like that. And that's all good, and if you're interested in that, there are people online that on YouTube that talk about stuff like that, okay? But what I'm teaching is technique, sharpening technique. And it don't really matter what kind of knife you're using. The technique that I teach will work on it. So, you know, and that's what I'm trying to do. I started this playlist to try to help people who didn't know how to sharpen, because I think it's, first of all, I think it's an important skill that people should have, especially men. And no, I'm not being sexist, and I really don't care what your opinion is on that either. But women should know how to sharpen as well. But especially for a man, you know, we ought to know how to get a sharp edge and keep one, because a lot of times there are a lot of things that rely upon sharp edges once you get doing certain things. Woodworking, where would it be without a sharp edge? Okay, so I think that it's important for us to know how to keep it, how to get a edge sharp, and how to keep an edge sharp. But I also like promoting the use and carry of pocket knives, because the only thing people carry around in their pocket now half the time is a little razor blade knife, you know, little disposable razor blade knives and stuff like that to open packages and stuff like that. And being or rather having a nice knife in your pocket to do something like that beats the heck out of a janky little piece of junk razor blade knife. You know, plus there's applications for the kitchen and all of that, but you will find if you carry a knife that there's all kind of applications that a sharp edge can be put to. So, and that's what this channel is for. It's not, hey, look at me, I know all these knife brands, and I, you know, I can tell you what's the best and what's the worst and all this other stuff. This is about creating an edge and maintaining it so that you can employ it when you need to. And what I'm doing, I'm not really staying on one side until I get a burr right now. Right now I'm just trying to kind of cut a bevel, a real bevel, a decent bevel into it. Once I get that, and that looks good, then I'll start working on burr creation. On this blade. You could do it the other way. I've done it, but I do that probably 90% of the time. I just work on one side until I get a burr and then move over. But as long as you get both of your bevels meeting properly, then you can move on to the burr method and get really good results that way. And this method takes longer. I mean, if you went to a lower grit stone, you would get results a lot faster. But the point of this is to show this is a one stone kind of deal. You can take this one stone and do quite a bit with it. And like I said, when I was young, one of these stones and some spit was pretty much all that I had. And it's how I learned to sharpen. And so that's why I recommend it. If you don't have patience, then go get you a lower, get you one of the fine or medium Indias. Beautiful. And starting to cut hair. And go to town, you know. A matter of fact, you know, while I'm at it, and I've mentioned this before, you could take a fine India or even a medium India, and that could be the only stone you ever use. You don't have to have a superb amount of refinement to get an edge that cuts. and cuts well. That's, you know, we have this tendency to think of sharpening in terms of, you know, refinement, and it's really not. You know, how much you want to refine the edge after you actually get an edge on a knife, that's up to you. And it can be as low as you want or as high as you want, as long as what you're doing serves the purpose you need it to serve. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about it. See, that's the thing, is we have this thing where, you know, we want acceptance. We want everyone to accept us, tell us, you know, what you're doing is right, what you're doing is good, what, you know. And a lot of that, some of that is because we tend to take shortcuts if we don't hold ourselves accountable to somebody else. But in my opinion, you'll find in sharpening that how much you hold yourself to task, to account, it's going to determine how good your edge is. If you just say, well, that's good enough and I don't care, and because it's easy to do that with what I'm talking about. You know, I'm telling you, lovely burr, I'm telling you, don't worry about what anybody else thinks. It's your edge and do what you want, okay? But I'm not telling you, don't worry about your edge being good, or don't worry about getting a good edge. That's not the message I'm giving you. And you need to understand that. Because at the end of the day, the quality of the edge that you're going to get, right here it is. These hands, that's what's going to give you your edge. And the mind behind them that refuses to accept, okay, and strives to get the nicest edge you can get at whatever grit rating you're sharpening with or refining with. And so that's the deal. And so don't take what I'm saying as a license to do a sloppy job, because that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is that with proper technique, lovely, the edge that you get is determined by you, whether or not what you want and what works for you. But you have to know the basics of sharpening, learn them, and apply them every flipping time to get the edge that you're looking for, a quality edge that serves you well, period. And that's on you, flat out. Now, I have a burr all the way to about here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to shoot. If you look, the stone is wide enough that I might be missing just a tiny little bit. But if I am, I'll correct that with the standard stroke like that. Once I reach that point. But right now, I'm going to work on just this area of the blade. Now, I've said before, you have to watch if you do stuff like this, that you don't end up getting an uneven bevel. So you need to pay attention. But this part of the blade does not need any more sharpening. I've got a burr. So instead of spending a lot of time on that part of the blade, I'm going to bring this as close to as I can before the bevel starts to be funny. And if you look at this knife, I don't know if you can see, but this is wider anyway. It stops widening out right about there. So I want to actually widen this part of the bevel more anyway. You should look at your knife, at your edge, at the bevel, and see what it looks like. And that'll tell you a lot of times what you can and what you cannot do on a blade. You know, we're not just blindly. And now what I've done is I've canted it so that I get just a little bit more. I'm covering that part of the edge that I might be missing otherwise. And you can tell I'm using pressure because the knife will actually dig in to the stone a bit and move it. And this moves anyway because this is slick as snot. So okay, the burr is moving down. Let's look at the bevel, see what the bevel's doing. Alright, I still got room to play. And now, well, that edge is twisted and curled up. So let's that edge is coming along, but that's whatever burr is on this side cutting. If I flipped it over, it might not cut so well. See? Because that burr is actually doing the cutting. That burr's up. If I've got a spot on this paper, that burr is up, so it's cutting. That's one of the mistakes a lot of beginners make, is they'll sharpen a knife and they'll end up halfway sharpening it and they'll get a burr on one side of the blade. And they'll go to cut paper or something else with it with their dominant hand, and the burr happens to be on the side facing the dominant hand, and they're, oh man, that cuts well. Well, yeah, it does on that side, but if you flip it over, it don't, because the burr is actually cutting, not the knife, not the edge. There's just a burr on it. Like, I don't know, a lot of you won't be familiar with it, but there's a thing called a card scraper in woodworking, and that is what, it doesn't really have an edge. That is the burr. You build a burr up on the card scraper, and that is actually what does the cutting. So that's something to keep in mind. Understand that one side of a knife can cut really well, but if you flip it over, now, lovely. That's looking really nice. If you look at this bevel, I don't know if you can see it. It's a little thick here, and then we go down to here. That's why, another reason that I'm working on this, but I'm not going to get it all in this sharpening. I'll just have to do consecutive sharpening. But if you look on this side, the bevel is really wide here, and then it narrows, and bevels on knives are, and I'm going to flip and go to the other side because I have a burr. But the bevels on blades are different from one side to the other most of the time when they come from a factory. And you want to kind of look at that bevel, and honestly, it doesn't matter, okay, to the cutting edge. Unless it's extreme, you're probably not going to notice any difficulty, although an uneven bevel can make your knife cut off to one side, or okay, if you get too extreme of that, it can affect how the knife cuts. But most of the time, slight variations, they're not going to matter. They're just not. But you should always kind of be looking at it, because you want to strive to get them as even as possible, just if for no other reason than to do it right. Okay, my stepson's mechanic, okay, when he was younger, he used to work on cars, and it wasn't really a mechanic. He wasn't getting paid to do it. That was something that he enjoyed. And dude, anyway, but he would put a car together. I would get him to work on my cars a lot, because he was better than I was at understanding what was going on, things like that. So, and he didn't mind helping. And so, but he would put a car together, you know. There would be stuff left over. And I would say, Alex, you know, what's all that stuff, you know, why is that left laying on the floor, the ground there, you know? Why didn't you put that back in? Oh, well, you don't need it. And sure enough, I didn't need it. The car worked and ran just fine. But there were parts missing. Okay, and much of it probably was smog related and stuff like that. But, of course, now he's a mechanic. He does it for a living, and he's learned a lot and that kind of deal. But, you know, when he was younger and when he first started, he just left it off, you know, because he knew what it was, and he knew it really wouldn't affect anything, because he was working on, you know, 70s model, a 70s model car, because that's the car that I had. And it really didn't matter, okay? But since he's grown and perfected more so what he does, he doesn't do that anymore, because he understands that he wants to do it right. And that's the thing. Look, you're going to grow, and you're going to develop preferences. You're going to develop opinions. You're going to develop your own way of doing things, and that's your journey. It's not mine. But as a teacher, it's my job to encourage you and tell you, hey, do the best you can to do it right. And so that's my, I don't know if you'd call it a lecture, for lack of a better term. That's my knife sharpening professorial. Someone told me, in fact, a couple of people have told me I should have been a college professor or whatever. Oh, well, that's my professorial lecture about growing and sharpening and finding your way and your technique and your preferences and stuff like that. Always keep in mind that you want to do it right. You want to see, the thing with it is the world can hold you to all kinds of standards, but, and this is lovely, just personally for me, okay, the best standard, the highest standard that a man can hold himself to is his own. If you develop standards, uncompromising standards for how you live and how you treat people and how you work and the personal boundaries in every aspect of your life, and hold to them, there are rich rewards for that. And today, in today's society, that is lacking. Yes, I know. Probably should have done one of the Let's Talk videos on that, but you're getting it for free, so don't look a gift horse in the mouth. But I'm just saying, listen, even when things go wrong in life, for me, okay, knowing that I was true to what I believed, even if I fail, lovely. That's lovely. Even if I fail, okay, I win. Because I did what I knew was right and good. New paper. Okay, that works. That's a nice working edge. Stand by. And people have asked me, well, how do I strap a knife? Should I try to hold the angle that the knife was sharpened at, or should I lay back a little bit and let the leather flex? Well, the leather will flex. You can lay back and the leather will flex to that edge, but I try to keep that angle that I sharpened at when I strop. And you can do this number, you can do this number, it doesn't really, or you can do a combination where you go like that and go like that. It just depends what feels right to you. Over time, I've tried them all, and I like that better, but that doesn't mean lovely. Shaving hair just fine. What does it sound like on the paper? Yeah, That'll work. And that's the thing. Whatever stone you choose or whatever, the most important thing is keep a standard. This is alcohol. I got this idea from Rough Rooster. Used to, I would just take the alcohol and kind of dab it in there like you would oil, stuff like that. This is a lot better idea. And so, you're working with water. This is a carbon steel blade, and it will patina over time, which is what I like. But you want to get moisture out of the pivot pin. You want to spray up in here, and then just take the knife and set it off to the side and let it dry naturally, and that'll help to displace moisture within the working parts of the knife. And then you can go back if you think you need to put a little oil in the pivot pin or whatnot. But all right, thank you for coming along. That's why a Soft Arkansas, in my opinion, is one of the best all-around knife and sharpening stones you can have. I think you ought to have at least one of these. And when you can find it or afford it, and they're like $25, a medium or a fine India stone or a crystalline in that range, or a 300, 400 grit diamond plate, some kind of lower end stone that you can do corrective work with if you need it, or that you can go to, like you've seen me do numerous times on these videos, to start an edge and bring a burr up and then move to this stone after you've removed that burr. You know, after you know that your bevel is perfect. But you can do it with this one stone as long as you've got a decent blade to start with that doesn't have chips and dings and stuff like that in it. It just takes a little longer. And truth be told, it takes a little longer on this stone, but it's going to take probably the same amount of time if you start with a lower grit stone and then move to this one. Okay, if you want this kind of refinement, which I do on most knives, I prefer this kind of refinement. So at least a Soft Ark. So all right, bless you. Talk to you later.